Hi, and welcome back to another Papetti Math YouTube video tutorial in Algebra 1. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 10 in your workbook on Lesson number 5, the quadratic formula, and we are continuing with exercise number 2, parts C and D in this video. So again, at the end of this video, if you find it helpful, please give the video a thumbs up to let me know that it worked for you. Otherwise, in the comments, please explain to me what I could do better to assist you in learning Algebra 1. So let's take a look at part C now. And it says 14x squared plus 1 is equal to 6x squared plus 7x. And again, our goal here is to find the exact solutions of this quadratic and write our answer in simplest radical form. So to begin, we want to make this equation equal to 0. That's always going to be our first step of solving any quadratic, is to make it equal 0. So we're going to move all of our terms to one side. I'm going to start off with the 6x squared. I subtract 6x squared from both sides, and I'm going to be left with 8x squared. Bring down my plus 1 is equal to 7x. Now I want to move that 7x to the left side of the equation, so I'll subtract it over to the other side, and bingo, there I go. I have it equal to 0, and I keep all my like terms separated, so I don't want to combine anything because none of them are like terms. And I'll have 8x squared minus 7x plus 1, and that would be standard form. So the next thing I want to do is, now that I have the standard form of a quadratic right here, is I want to list out my a, b, and c values. So I want to list out what my a equals, and that's going to be 8. B is going to equal -7, and c will be 1. After I have my a, b, and c values, I'm ready to proceed with my quadratic formula. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have x equal -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times a. Rewrite the formula every single time. It'll help you to better understand it. It'll help you to better memorize it, although in some cases you don't necessarily need to memorize it. It'll be given to you. But also, it just gets you into the hang of knowing where you're starting. So I know I'm going to start with this formula, so I'm going to write it down first. Now, I'm going to substitute into that formula. I'm going to have negative, because it says -b, and my b value is -7. So it's actually going to be a double negative there, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -7 squared in parentheses, very important, especially if you're doing this in your calculators. Not having the parentheses will change your answer, minus 4 times a times c, which is just 1. Don't really need it there, but we'll put it there just in case, or just because. And over 2 times a, and a is 8. And now we're going to do some simplifying. Well, a -7 is a +7, okay? Plus or minus the square root. Well, -7 squared is 49, minus 4 times 8 is 32, and 49 minus 32 will give me 17 over 16. Now, if we're taking a look at this, we first see, can we simplify this radical? And your answer is no, because that number 17 is prime. It can't be split into any other factors, so that's going to be our final simplified radical. And then we look at the coefficients everywhere. We have a coefficient of 1, 7, and 16, and we ask ourselves, do all three of those coefficients have a GCF of something other than 1? And the answer is no. So this is actually our final answer. X is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 divided by 16. Looks crazy, but that's because the decimal is crazy. And that's why we call it irrational. So when we have irrational answers, they will look a little bit crazy down there. Okay. Now in part D, we have 4x squared plus 4x minus 8 equals 1. And again, first thing we want to start off by doing is making this equation equal to 0. So we're going to have 4x squared plus 4x minus 9 is equal to 0. And now that we have that equation equal to 0, let's again go off to the side and write out what our a, our b, and our c value is to help us remember that what we have positives and negatives. So a is going to be 4, b is also 4, and C is negative 9. Be careful, make sure you have a negative 9. After you have your A, B, and C value, let's write out that quadratic formula. X is equal to negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2 times A. Substitution time. So I'm going to have negative B, which is 4, so negative 4, plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is negative 9, all over 2 times A, which is 4. Lots of 4's here. All right, let's simplify. We have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. 4 times 4 is 16 times negative 9 would be negative 80. So this is really 16 minus negative 80. I think I did something. Is that right? Do I believe myself? 4 times 4 is 16 times 9, is 144. So 4 squared is 16. 4 times negative 9 is negative 144. So this should really say 16 minus negative 144. All divided by 2 times 4, which is 8. So we're going to move our work up here so we can have some more room. And we're going to have x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. That's really plus 144. So that's going to be 160 over 8. I'm going to have to make a factor tree somewhere on this page. Let's go right over here. I have a space over here. We're going to have to make a factor tree for 160 because we need to simplify this radical to place it in simplest radical form. So two numbers that multiply to 160, many different combinations, but I'm going to choose 10 and 16. 10 will simplify to 5 times 2, so I'll circle both of those because they're both prime numbers. 16 will be 8 times 2, and 8 will be 4 times 2, and 4 will be 2 times 2. Okay, now to simplify this radical right here, I'm going to go back to this side over here, and I'm going to recopy x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus, okay, what do I have a pair of? I have a pair of 2's down here. I'll cross off 2 2's, write 1 2 on the outside. I've got 2 more 2's. I'll cross off 2 2's and write another 2 on the outside. That's all my pairs. Now I go to my singles. I have a single 5 and a single 2, so I put my single 5 and single 2 inside the radical. All over 8. I could simplify further. X is going to be equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2 times 2 will give me 4. Radical 5 times 2 will give me 10 over 8. Now that I have the simplest radical form right here, now my last step is to look at all of my terms and see if they all have a GCF. I'm looking at the 8, the 4, and the negative 4 specifically. Do they all have a GCF? Again, we ignore the square root of 10 because numbers that are in the square root we're not concerned about. We're only concerned about the 4, the coefficient of the square root, the negative 4, and the 8. So the greatest common factor of those three numbers is 4, so we could divide all three of these numbers by 4 to get an even simpler version of this answer. So we're going to divide negative 4 by 4 and get negative 1, plus or minus 4 divided by 4 is 1, radical 10. So you don't really need this one. You could just have it plus or minus radical 10 over 8 divided by 4, which is 2. And this here is your final answer in simplest radical form. Was this video helpful for solving parts C and D? If it was, click on the thumbs up, and then you're ready to move on to exercise number 3, which you can access by clicking on the link in this video to make it easy for you.